difference anyway. It's all a party. So the Jewish New Year is coming up, right? Rosh Hashanah is coming up. It happens every year, which kind of makes sense. The Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. If you ask a rabbi this time of year, so how are preparations going for the New Year? You might hear the response like this: shofar, show good. Things are... I would love for you all to be unmuted so that I could hear it and get it, but you know what? It's all... There you go. There you go. I'm feeling the love. But it reminds me of a story. There was a fellow who's in Coney Island. That's where he grew up back in the day. Anybody from Brooklyn? Anybody from Brooklyn?
Yes.
Nice.
Lots of fun.
You and me.
Brooklyn and Sue. Brooklyn in the house. Anybody visit Coney Island? Coney Island?
My father's from.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there's a guy. He's decides to go back to the old neighborhood. He's in Coney Island. He's sitting on a park bench, and a guy sits down next to him. They look at each other. Whoa, Yankel, Shmerel. It's a great reunion. They hadn't seen each other in years. These are fake names. I'm protecting the innocent. They're real names, but Anyway, so they start talking. They start schmoozing, catching up. One guy had moved to Chicago. The other guy was still in the neighborhood. Oh, how's it going? Family, blah, blah, blah. After a little bit, the Shmerel, who lives there still, says to Yankel, come on in. My apartment's right here. Come on in. Grab a bite to eat. We'll continue talking. Anyway, he comes over, and they're enjoying and catching up and eating. And it's wonderful. It goes way into the night. Well, it's early in the morning. Early in the morning, and Yankel turns to Shmerel and says, I don't have my watch. What time is it? Shmerel says, I actually don't have a watch or a clock in my apartment. He says, how do you tell time? He says, watch. He opens up his window. No, sorry. He pulls out a shofar. He says, with this. He said, how do you tell time with this? He's like, watch. Opens up his window, puts it by his mouth, does a big tekiah, and immediately the neighbor says, are you crazy? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. He says, that's how I tell the time. All right. Good. So let's jump in. All right, we got some shofar jokes in. It is almost Rosh Hashanah after all. Okay, let's jump into our conversation today. This class is entitled, the course is entitled Worrier to Warrior, and it's all about working with our anxieties, with our negative emotions. And last week we kind of laid a lot of the groundwork for this conversation, and the goal really is to understand how to deal better, or how, some effective tools to dealing with our inner challenge, our inner emotional challenges, using Jewish wisdom, specifically through the lens of Jewish mystical teachings, Kabbalistic thought, Hasidic thought, the book of Tanya. So that's going to be the major focus of where the tools are coming from for this session, or for these sessions. So last week we explained, we laid the groundwork with some very important information, and we said that there is an inner dichotomy that exists within all of us, and the line is not drawn strictly between good and evil. That's too easy. There's a much more subtle line that is drawn within the human heart, because somebody could say, look, I'm not evil, so I don't know what you're talking about. I have no dichotomy. There's still a dichotomy. There's still a duality within the human condition. It's not between good and evil, necessarily. It could be as subtle as the difference between lower and higher, or self-oriented or selfless-oriented living. Am I living for myself? In other words, is my goal to focus on what I need, or is my aim in life focusing on what I am needed for? Remember what JFK said? Ask not what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Kind of like that. He got that from Judaism. I don't know if he did, but he kind of did, right? This is the line that's drawn. Am I living in this moment? And it's a moment-by-moment question. It's not like, you answer it once and you're done. This is an every-moment question. Am I in it for myself, or am I in it for the greater good. And I could be doing the same exact thing on the outside, but on the inside, the question is, what's fueling my action? What is motivating? So I'm helping a friend move apartments. So what's fueling it? Is it because I want to be of help? Because I love them, I care about them, and I want to help? Or is it, if I help them move, what's going to happen? You know how it's going to come back to me? Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that we're helping, but it does change the dynamic of what's going on. It changed it on multiple levels. By raise of hand, have you ever had an experience where you did something for someone else, or someone else did something for you? Underlying it was a motivation of self-interest, and ultimately that undermined some of the good that was done. Yes, right? If you come to the person and say, don't you remember all the things that I've done for you? No one wants to hear that. Or if somebody says that to you, right? Are you with me on this? Yes? Yeah, is it resonating? If you tell someone, you know how much I've helped you out, and you can't even ... You know what they're going to say? Thank you very much. I never asked for your help. You know what? Take all your help back. That's typically the response. Are you with me on this? Yes? Okay, that's human nature. If you're helping, then the ideal is to help in an altruistic way. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Look, talk is cheap. It's easy to talk about it. To actually practice it is difficult. But Tanya says, and this is the major book that we're going to focus on, this book of Jewish mystical wisdom, Tanya explains that at the core of it, at the core of the human dualistic condition, is not good and evil. It's selfless and selfish. That's what it is. It's higher, lower. It's for you, yes, quid pro quo. I can't pronounce it. Quid pro quo, right? It's either I'm there to be of help, or what am I going to get out of this? By the way, there are many relationships that are transactional in nature. You're allowed to have transactional relationships. If you go to the grocery store, right, then you want a transaction. You're not just altruistically giving the cashier your money, you probably want your groceries in exchange. You're giving them $2 and you're getting a dozen eggs, right? Or whatever the going rate is now. Whatever it is. That's the way it is. So yes, you're not giving altruistically or selflessly. You're in it to win it. You're in it not to win it, but you're in it to get. But there are opportunities. There are moments in life in which we could rise to a different place and be there for the other, be there for a higher good, be there for God. Whatever that greater cause is, we can step up and allow our higher self to expand, spread its wings, breathe some oxygen, and do something for something greater than self or other than self. Because at the core of it, we have two souls. We have a soul that is a natural, materialistic, physical-oriented animal soul, which is driven by instinct and self-pleasure. And then we have a higher self, a godly soul, that's driven and motivated by purpose. Very altruistic. And we explained last week, I tried to explain last week, how understanding what's under the hood of the human condition, this is every single human being has these two forces within. All of us have these two forces within. Understanding this can help us get through a lot of the emotional challenges, difficult times that we might have internally. So when we're faced with an emotional challenge, whether it's, like we said last week, the imposter syndrome, questioning ourselves, do we really belong? Do I really deserve this job, this thing, this life, this whatever it is, this happiness? When it comes to questions of imposter syndrome, self-doubt, we can pull out this teaching and help us, and it can help us get through it. Today our topic is shame. When we're feeling shame, then this can help us. Guilt, this can help us. All sorts of negative emotions, this can help us. I just want to reset one more thing, and then we're going to move on to our topic today of shame. Last week, I asked the question, so what's so bad with negative emotions? So you feel bad, so all right, so what's so bad about feeling bad? And we had a nice discussion, and then I shared with you that ultimately one of the downsides of negative emotions, of feeling bad, whatever that bad feeling is, there's so many different types, but what's equal across the board is that a negative feeling is typically going to sap our energy. And in life, and we know this, firsthand, we need as much energy as absolutely possible. We cannot have any energy drains or energy leaks in our system. Someone's driving their car, and they pull into a parking spot. They come back to their car, and they notice like some liquid, on the ground. Something's leaking. That's not a good sign, because whatever that liquid was, you need it in there. You don't need it on the ground. It's not good for the car. The same thing is true for us, right? We talked about going under the hood, opening up the hood of our own personality, of our inner psyche and emotional disposition. Okay, but here's the overarching idea: we cannot afford energy leaks. We cannot afford our energy being sapped and drained of energy before we even get started. Energy anyway is at a premium, right? There's only so much to go around. We cannot afford to have all of our energy being pulled into, I could have, I should have, how come I didn't, I feel bad about this, that, the other. Too much stuff that's pulling away from what I need to do right now. Okay, so let's deal with today's topic. Today's topic is shame. Now, when I say shame, what I'm referring to is the type of self-judgment that produces, or that is at the root of this type of shame. In other words, I'm not talking about the idea of, let's say, embarrassment, when somebody, embarrasses somebody else, God forbid, publicly shames them or whatever. I'm talking about more of an inner feeling. This is not something that someone else is doing to you. This is something that we are doing to ourselves. A sense of shame. This is different than a sense of guilt. Guilt and shame are not exactly the same thing, although oftentimes we confuse the two. So I want you to, let's make this a little bit real. I'm not going to ask you to divulge any deep, dark secrets if you don't want to. No, I'm kidding. No one's going to have to divulge anything at all. But I want you to think, in order to make this a little bit more personal and real, this discussion today, I want you to think about a moment in your life that caused you to feel deeply ashamed. Again, not someone that embarrassed you in public or something like that. No. Something that you did or whatever that you then internally felt a deep sense of shame and embarrassment about. Okay, so think about it. Think about it. I'll give like 5 seconds. Whatever, I'll give a few seconds. Think about it. Only one example. You only need one, right? One example where you felt a sense of inner shame. And now I want to ask you, if anyone wants to share, not what it was about, but how did it feel? What did it feel like? What does shame feel like inside? Anybody want to jump in? Embarrassment. Good. What else?
Sorrow.
Okay, good. Sorrow. What else? What other words come to mind in that feeling of shame? Angst. Okay, good. What else? Disappointment. Good. Excellent. What else? I don't know that there's anything else, but I think everyone has different experiences, so I want to have as much disappointment. Okay, good.
Self-awareness. Not to feel shame. I mean, there's guilt and embarrassment, and I don't know the difference. I'm a positive person. I say move on.
Right.
So shame is not part of who I am. I think. I'm listening to you.
Now you're making me feel ashamed for feeling shame. Joking. Look, I think some people, as we go through these lessons, some of the the negative emotions will resonate more with some and less with others. But I think it's on some level this applies to everybody. So I'm hearing a lot of good descriptions, and I also heard you mention the idea of guilt and what is the difference. So I want to share with you a text. This is going to be text number 1 that kind of expresses the distinction between guilt and shame, which is very important for our conversation. Okay, can you all see?
Can you make it bigger?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to make it bigger in a second as soon as I jump in. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is coming from, I love this, Encyclopedia of Deception. What a fantastic title, Encyclopedia of Deception. Okay, Martin V. Day, guilt. Okay, here we go. Text 1, the emotion of guilt. So here's the difference between guilt and shame. The emotion of guilt is a negative feeling that people can experience for a wrongdoing, such as being untruthful or deceptive to others. Guilt is often confused with shame. People may refer to these emotions incorrectly or interchangeably. However, much evidence suggests that they are distinct. Similar to guilt, shame is an unpleasant feeling, but shame tends to be a more painful experience and is characterized by feeling worthless, exposed, and small. There are not reliable distinctions between the type of situations that can separately evoke guilt or shame, and it is possible to feel a certain level of both emotions after a misdeed or failure. Guilt and shame can be distinguished by the negative evaluations that individuals make after lying or following some other harmful actions. Negatively judging the self by focusing on what I did wrong can elicit shame, whereas negatively judging the wrongful behavior by focusing on what I did wrong can evoke guilt. Thus, it is perhaps easier to understand why guilt may feel less painful than shame, because guilt stems from a greater focus on a temporary act as terrible, rather than a global evaluation of the self as a terrible person. And so I want to summarize this. I think it's a brilliant reading. I want to summarize this by saying the following. Guilt is saying, wow, what I did was really bad, or I really messed, that was really, that action was really misplaced. That's guilt. I feel bad about what I did. Shame is, what does that say about me? The fact that I did that, or even I didn't do that, but I thought about doing that, what does that say about me as a person? What kind of person, I don't even want to say negative language even in this example, but a person might say about themselves, what kind of, low, degrading, whatever, shameful person they are because of what they did. So it's not about what they did, it's about who they are. So guilt is guilt over an action. Shame is shame and embarrassment for oneself. Does that make sense, that distinction? Yes? So which is deeper, which is more superficial? Unmute yourself. Which is deeper?
Shame.
Shame.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Shame cuts deeper. Shame is not about a behavior. Shame is about an identity. Right? A behavior is one thing. I feel bad about a behavior, that's guilt. Shame is, what kind of person does that? Not that anyone else asks you that question, but we ask ourselves the question. And we're stuck on that question sometimes. And that's shame. And not everybody suffers with shame. Not everybody. But it's prevalent enough that it's worthy of focusing on it in one of our sessions. And I would say, even if some of us in this class right now feel like maybe that's not the biggest emotional challenge we're dealing with right now, nonetheless, a lot of what we're going to explore as far as the tools of combating shame can be applied to other areas in which we might feel challenged, on a day-to-day basis. But again, guilt is feeling about something we did. Shame is feeling like a failure for who we are. That is the bottom line distinction between guilt and shame. We're going to deal with shame. So what do? What does a person do when they feel like a failure, or they feel less than, they feel like a disappointment, they feel inadequate, they feel not just guilty for actions, but like, what kind of person am I? That's a very deep and cutting emotion. We talk about negative emotions that drain energy. I mean, that self-impression, an impression about self that I am less than worthy or less than kosher, whatever the adjective is, that's a very draining emotion. A feeling of existential shame is very, very draining. Just to give you, I laugh because I always find it funny. The Torah tells us the story of Adam and Eve, right? Remember Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, the snake, the apple that wasn't an apple, right? You know it wasn't an apple, right? Sorry for dropping this on you in the middle of this class. It wasn't an apple. According to the Jewish scholars, it was a number of other things. It could have been a number of other things, but it was not an apple. Apple is only an apple because it's depicted like that in art, and that's it. In the Bible, it talks about a fruit, not an apple. So why an apple? You got to ask whoever drew it, whoever painted it first. Michelangelo, whoever originally painted the painting of the apple. We got to go to them. But getting back to our story, so Adam and Eve, they eat from the forbidden fruit, and immediately, the Bible tells us, the Torah says, they become embarrassed. They became ashamed. They covered themselves. They hid behind the bushes. They realized they were naked. Ay, you got to hide. By the way, I'm doing a course starting in the fall called Secrets of the Bible. I was supposed to do it at Chabad last spring, April, but you know April plans, right? Remember April plans? Right out the window. Anyway, Secrets of the Bible will do a deep dive into Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, and other like wild biblical stories that seem like Baba Mises. You know what a Baba Mice is? Like fairy tales. We're going to learn it from a much deeper perspective. But I want to give you a little bit of an insight into this. What happens when Adam and Eve feel ashamed? Think about it. They ate from the tree. They did something wrong. They didn't feel guilt about eating. Oh, we did something wrong. They judged themselves. What kind of people do this? Just created by God. Had one rule. Who does that? They were hiding. They wanted to bury themselves. They wanted to hide themselves. They wanted to crawl under a rock. Of course, you can't hide from God, as the Torah points out. But nonetheless, that's what they wanted to do. When we feel shame, all we want to do is pull the covers over our head. It's a massive emotional drain. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that letting shame fester, which is really a negative self-image, is not good. It's not good because it doesn't feel good. It's also not good because it drains our energy and it stops us from doing something great. And if we feel shame about ourselves, how likely are we to do something noble? Because what kind of shameful person makes the world a better place? Right? If I'm really such a terrible person as I think I might be, I mean, God forbid, right? But if that's where I'm stuck, then the likelihood of me doing the next amazing thing is not so high. So how do we deal with this? So let's get back to the book of Tanya. We explored last week and earlier today that there are two personas inside of us. There's a lower self, self-driven, a higher self, purpose-driven, right? It's either pleasure or purpose. That's it. You want to keep the alliteration going? Let's make it simple. Pleasure or purpose? What's my focus in this moment? Is it about me, or is it about a higher cause, a higher good? So understanding this takes us to the next idea, the next duality. Two types of people. So what are the two types of people? I'm going to give you the Hebrew terms, which if you took my course Soul Maps, you might recall this. We're going to go a little bit deeper today. The two words are tzaddik and Benoni. Tzaddik and Benoni. I'm going to actually write this in the chat so that you can see this typed out. Tzaddik and Benoni. Okay, there you go. I did all caps. I don't know why. Just because I felt inspired to do all caps. Question is that embedded from childhood? Cookie, did you ask that about the two personas embedded from childhood? Yes. Yes. We are created, it's not a flaw, it's a feature. We're created with, by the way, if we only had the higher self, we might forget to eat, and that would be dangerous. We need a lower self to remind us to take care of our own needs. We need a higher self to remind us that it's not only about us. The life is the balance between the two. So tzaddik and beinoni represent two ways in which we deal with the balance. So here's the deal. The tzaddik, so check this out. I know I just talked about balance. I'm going to backtrack a drop when talking about the tzaddik. The tzaddik, the Hebrew of it. Tzaddik, the translation. Tzaddik means righteous. Beinoni means average. Not in a negative way, but like, normal. What's normal anyway? But down the middle, so to speak. And tzaddik is extreme righteous, pious. What does that mean in our conversation? Here's what it means. The way Tanya describes the tzaddik is, the tzaddik has evolved themselves to a place where not only are they doing the right thing, i.e. the purposeful thing, the thing that's for, the action that's for a greater cause, but inside they're not even motivated by selfish interests anymore. Even when it comes to selfish, what is normally considered selfish behaviors like eating and drinking, I know I'm backtracking a bit on what I said, but the tzaddik eats and drinks for a higher cause. When a tzaddik eats and drinks, it's in order to fuel up to do the next good thing. So it's not at all an indulgent experience, like I'm hungry, I want to eat something that tastes good. It's, I got to fuel up because I have a calling. I need to live in order to do, to give, to benefit others, to make the world a better place, tikkun olam, to repair the world. There's so many things that I'm called on to do, and because of that, I need to fuel up. There was a fellow who was connected with our synagogue a number of years ago, who got cancer, and he had a long battle, and ultimately he succumbed. In one of his prayers, when he was very sick, he wrote a letter to express his prayers. And the letter said something to the effect of, I have more that I need to accomplish. Please give me health. Please help me, praying to God, please asking for health, but with a simple line, not, I'm not ready to go, not, there's more that I need to do for the community or for the synagogue, whatever it is. That was the way he expressed it. And it's a powerful way of thinking about even our own needs. Are they really about self, or are they about purpose? So the tzaddik is someone who always lives for purpose and doesn't even feel inside anymore a motivation that is self-driven. There's no selfish motive even on the inside. In other words, the tzaddik is no longer struggling between these two personas, higher self and lower self. The tzaddik is completely on board with higher self. So the tzaddik wakes up and says, what am I needed for? And I need to eat, not to eat, but in order to do more of what I'm needed for. And that's the entire motivation. Now, that's a tzaddik. A tzaddik is a very rare breed. I mean, how many people do we know that are completely selfless, not only in their actions, but in their agenda, in their inner agendas in their heart? They don't even have a self-oriented bone in their body. Very, very, very extremely rare. So I'll share with you once again the text from our lesson, and I'm going to read text number 2. This comes from the Talmud. The Talmud says, God saw that the righteous, in the Hebrew, tzaddikim, this level of tzaddik, God saw that the righteous are few in number, so He planted them in every generation. As it is written, the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. What that means is God saw that throughout history, there would only be relatively few. So God made sure to space them out, to allocate a few in every generation, but only a very small handful. The vast, vast, vast majority of human beings on planet Earth, when I say vast majority, I'm referring to essentially, statistically, what we would call 100%. I mean, the handful, count on one hand of tzaddikim in this world, statistically, don't even show up. It's not even 99.9. It's like way more that are not like this. Most of us, and again, I apologize if you are in this rare category. If you are, that's awesome, right? More power to you. But most of us, I would say all of us here, have a self-oriented bone in our body. In other words, we have something or some things about our personality, about our inner selves that says, I want for myself, because I do, and that's my instinct, that's my nature, etc. So a tzaddik is the rare breed. A tzaddik is someone who doesn't even want to do something that is self-oriented, something lower, always wants to do something higher. What about the Beinoni? The Beinoni is our second persona. The Beinoni is actually our hero, not the tzaddik. The tzaddik is like a little bit out of touch, right? The tzaddik, all right, good for them, but hard to relate. The Beinoni is our hero, and it's who we all can become. What's the Beinoni? The Beinoni is someone who has both personas, the lower and the higher, someone who struggles between pleasure and purpose, someone who sometimes wants to... Marlene, I'll get your question in a second. Someone who sometimes is ready to go and be of service, but very often also says, nope, I don't want to. I want to think about me. I need to think about me. I need to take care of myself. I need to, enjoy what I want to enjoy, even if it's not so healthy, etc. That's what the Beinoni is. But the Beinoni, this is where we actually strive to be the Beinoni. Beinoni is somebody who, despite the duality within, when it comes to action, is consistently making the right choice to do the right thing. So when faced with the quandary, when faced with the struggle between sleeping in or helping out a friend who needs us, giving them a ride to the store or whatever it is, so the Beinoni, the tzaddik, doesn't even have a question. The Beinoni has the question, but makes the right choice. When I say the right choice, let me not judge it, makes the higher choice, makes the selfless of service choice, as opposed to the self-feeding, the self-fulfilling, the what I want, what I need choice. So that's who the Beinoni is. So the Beinoni is someone who absolutely has both souls, lower and higher, both poles, lower and higher, but still, when it comes to action, is choosing the higher selfless action. Now, let's take a look at, share with you one more text. Not only one more, but one more for now. Let's do text number 3. Here we go. Now, he frames it in Tanya in the context of, spiritual actions versus materialistic actions. Here we go. The status of Beinoni is attainable for all people. In other words, you don't have to be a tzaddik to be a Beinoni. On the contrary, if you're a tzaddik, you're a tzaddik. Beinoni is attainable for all people. Achieving this status ought to be every person's goal. At any time, any person can be a Beinoni, because the Beinoni does not have an aversion to the unholy. To have an aversion for the unholy is not practical for all people, because that is a feeling that we cannot necessarily control. And not all times are alike. The Beinoni's task is only to turn away from evil and do good in actual practice, in deed, speech, and thought. In these areas, the choice, ability, and freedom are given to every person to act, speak, and think in ways that are contrary to the desire of the heart and even diametrically opposed to it. And what he's saying here is, even if in this moment right now, you or I might want to do something that is, let's just say, euphemistically, unholy, right? Let's say we want to do something that's, in Yiddish, nicht kosher, not so holy, right? Not so, Nothing that we would want our mother to know about, right? Not something that's selfless, not something that's giving, something that's self-serving, to say the least. So in that moment, you and I still have the choice to override that desire and actually do the right thing. You and I could feel the tug toward the lower behavior, but still override that and make the right choice. This is an example that I've given countless times, and I'm sure you've heard me say it before if you've been in my classes before. You're driving down the street in a car, and you need to get somewhere. Really, you have a destination you need to get to. And then you encounter a pesky red light. You know those things? You know, they have those things, they're suspended across the road and an intersection, and it turns colors, and you see red. And you're thinking, this is what I need. A red light now. What do? Okay, if you're a law-abiding citizen, you stop and you wait till it turns green, right? I'm assuming everyone here is a law-abiding citizen most of the time, right? So you stop your car. So I'll ask you the question. Did you want to stop your car? Did you want to? No. Did you do it anyway? Yeah. Can you do things you don't want to do? Yeah. Then you can be a Beinoni. Done. Done. Beinoni. That's it. You're a Beinoni. You wanted to do something selfless. The right thing to do is to stop. You really wanted to do the selfish thing about getting to where you want to go. You know, all the other cars, be darned. Nonetheless, you stopped. Guess what? In that moment, you were a Beinoni. Again, a Beinoni, we can elevate to higher considerations. This is a very basic level of understanding this, but that's a demonstration. You and I can do something that we don't want to do. You're not enjoying it. You don't like it. You're feeling the opposite. Do it anyway. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. At any time, any person can choose to be a Beinoni, because a Beinoni is not about feeling holy. A Beinoni is about feeling unholy, but doing the right thing anyway. It's wanting to sleep in, but getting dressed and driving your friend or neighbor to the store. That's what it is. A Beinoni is not someone who's always, yes, let me be helpful. And no, a Beinoni is someone who says, I don't want to help you. Well, don't say that. But who thinks that, but who does it anyway. That's what a Beinoni is. Now, make sense so far? Sort of? Yes? Questions? Let me pause for questions. Questions, comments?
I want to be funny and say, what about the yellow light?
Yeah. Yellow lights, I'm not going there, because yellow lights, everyone has a different approach. Because I think people learn from in different states and different manuals. So some people, like, yellow is you gun it, right? Like yellow is like, whoosh. Some people, yellow is, you take caution. I'm not judging, right? This is a very safe space. We're creating a very safe space to have this conversation. Let me look at the chat, because it looks like we have a few questions or a few comments. So God could create more tzaddikim or tzaddiks to make a better world, but chose not to. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. The tzaddik is kind of like, this is what can never be that inside, but we can strive at least for that behavior. Yeah, but because it's all about the struggle. Paul is asking, so there's no struggle with the flesh for a tzaddik, correct? Yes. Not. And I just want to be clear. It's not that the tzaddik does not engage in physical activities, but those physical activities are entirely motivated by a higher purpose. One of my other go-to examples, which you've heard before, is filling up your car with gasoline. When you go to the gas station, you are entirely fueling up your car to continue driving. It's not about the experience. I've never seen an Instagram post, a selfie with your gasoline, like, whoa, opted for the 93 octane or whatever it is. Never happened. Why? Because it's not a sensual experience. It's not about like the gassing, fueling up. It's not the experience. It's about a very practical, pragmatic, utilitarian action. I need to keep on going so I'm going to fuel up. So eating and drinking could be the same way theoretically. Why not? Right? I need to continue doing good things. I have to live. To live means I have to have food. So I'm fueling up to continue. But the experience is not self-contained. It's a means to an end. It's not an end unto itself. Does that make sense? So the tzaddik looks at everything. This would be true for all physical and activities, etc. Would be all about a higher purpose. It doesn't mean there can't be any physical sensation or enjoyment, but the goal is for something higher, as opposed to everyone else, everyone pretty much. That we have, we're torn in different directions. We're pulled higher, but we're also very much pulled lower. But again, the point is not what's going on inside. That was last week. The point is, okay, what do we do with it? The tzaddik doesn't have the other feeling inside. So the tzaddik really only has one soul at this point. But the rest of us, we have this duality. And the role of Abandoning, and the goal of Abandoning is to feel the burn, to feel the tension, to feel that lower self rear its head. I'm not going to call it ugly because it's just natural head. And nonetheless, push back against it and say, I'm overriding it. I know you want me to gun it and take the red light. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to follow the rules. I know I want to sleep in. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to help out my neighbor, help out my friend. So that's what a Beinoni is. So now, understanding this is really, really helpful in dealing with shame. Because what is shame? Shame is caused, we explained before that the difference between shame and guilt is feeling bad, I'll get to the question, feeling bad about what you've done, but shame is feeling bad about who you are. Not, oh yeah, I did this, I messed up. But, oh yeah, I'm a mess up, right? God forbid anyone should ever say that. But we think that sometimes, right? Like, not that I did a wrong action, but I am fundamentally wrong or flawed or messed up or whatever it is. Again, God forbid. But that these thoughts sometimes are plague us, and that's what shame is. If we wanted to kind of map it out, shame essentially is feeling bad about not being a tzaddik. Are you with me? Shame is, based on what we just explained, shame is feeling bad about not being a tzaddik. Like the fact that I have a lower self that pulls me in a lower direction, and the fact that I haven't always been 100%, able to stand up to that. So that's why I'm feeling bad about myself, about my identity, not about what I've done, but about my identity. I feel bad that I have a lower self. So in Tanya, once we break this down, he says, now that you understand all of this, now we see why it doesn't make sense to feel shame. Why? Because what were you expecting? Not to have that lower self. Sorry, that's how human beings are created. Oh, you wanted to be a tzaddik? Why don't you wake up feeling bad that you don't live in Buckingham Palace? Why don't you feel bad that you're not, all sorts of things, because that's not reality. Oh, so for the vast majority of us, the reality is that we're not going to be a tzaddik, that we're going to struggle with the struggles of abandoning, and that's the way it is. So don't feel bad about that, right? That's who you are. That's who I am. Let me explain this. There's much more to say about this. Let me do this or develop this a little bit more by sharing my screen with you and talking about frustration. Look at this. Exercise 2.1. I love this. Realistically, to which degree are the following scenarios likely to frustrate you? Okay, I'm going to make this a drop bigger. Okay, your car breaks down and you need to get around via Uber. Is that annoying? Is that frustrating? I think so. You can't afford the car of your choice. You can't afford the luxury car of your choice. You can't afford a private jet. You haven't yet sprouted wings. Has anybody been frustrated for not having yet sprouted wings? No? Why not? Wouldn't that be amazing? Why not?
Not reality.
Yeah, it's not an expectation. But your expectation is that your car should work. So when your car breaks down, it's like, that's annoying, that's frustrating, because of expectations. But this last one, right, not sprouting wings, there's no expectation, so how bad do you feel? Housing. Not having a home at all. That's frustrating. That's very frustrating. You can't afford an apartment that meets your needs. You can't afford to buy only to rent. You can't afford to buy the luxury home. You can't afford to purchase Buckingham Palace. Have you ever woken up one day and said, I feel terrible about myself because I can't afford Buckingham Palace? I don't think any one of us had that feeling. Why not? Because there's no expectation. So when there's no expectation, there's no frustration. Same thing is true with leisure, and here we have a golfing example, which I don't want to get into because we already have enough examples. The point is that the degree of frustration, which is an element of shame, right? Because shame is being frustrated about who we are inside, or what it is that we are and who we are. That level of frustration, which leads to shame, is directly proportionate to our expectations. Which means that as long as we expect to be perfect, when we encounter the truth that we're not perfect, that makes us feel terrible, and we go into a tailspin. So Tanya says the most empowering thing in the world. You and I, we're not perfect, and we're not meant to be perfect. And the moment we embrace that is the moment that we can let go of the expectation and let go of the frustration. Remember, frustration is directly correlated to expectation. If there's no expectation, there's no frustration. When there is expectation, there's frustration. So if I expect to be perfect and pure inside and a tzaddik, and then I realize, Gewalt, I'm not perfect, I feel terrible about that. I'm not perfect, then we're going to feel bad about that. But when we tell ourselves, I get it, I understand, God gave me a higher self, God gave me a lower self, the fact that I'm desiring lower selfish things makes sense, the fact that sometimes I'm not perfect in withstanding and withholding that fierce desire, those fierce desires and that pull also makes sense. Not that that's an excuse, but it makes sense. So I don't feel bad about who I am. I'm motivated to make a change for the better and to not succumb to my lower vices and temptations next time. But that doesn't throw me off my game and make me feel like a bad person. What kind of bad person? I'm a normal human being. Mazel tov. I have a higher self and a lower self. Nothing bizarre about that at all. Does that make sense? Yes? So in defining, I just want to draw all three. 1, 2, 3. Point 1 is that we have two selves, higher and lower. Point 2 is that the vast majority of us are a Beinoni, or trying to be a Beinoni, which means that we feel the lower self and we're working against that to still do the higher thing. That point 1 and point 2 directly leads to point number 3, which is about our expectations. Our expectations should not be that we should be perfect. And how do we even think? Why did we even want? How could we even fall into such a thing? It makes sense. Totally makes sense. We have a lower self that God put inside of us. No reason to feel bad about that. Now, no reason to do it either, right? It's not a carte blanche, do whatever you want because God made you that way. No, the same God that made us that way also says, stop at the red light, right? The same God, or the same, higher power that gave us both souls, higher and lower, also tells us, when you feel that lower pull, try not to act on it, don't act on it. Nonetheless, the feeling of shame, of that inadequacy, of falling, of questioning or judging self harshly, that we shouldn't do. Now, correcting behavior, absolutely. And next week we'll talk about guilt and how guilt could be a catalyst for correcting behavior, but how to use guilt in a proper way and not in a negative way about the behavior itself. But today is shame. And shame, we established all the way at the beginning, is about identity. Who I am. Who I am, if I determine that I'm flawed, that could make me feel bad. But Tanya says, oh, you're flawed? You realize you're flawed? Good, welcome to the party. Welcome to the party. You're flawed like everyone else. Everyone is flawed. Everyone has a lower self. Again, it doesn't mean we have a free card to punch, do whatever you want. What it means is, don't look at yourself so harshly. You're a Beinani. Mazel tov. You're normal. You have a lower self. Normal. Right? You go to the doctor and the doctor says, that's normal. You feel much better, right? At least it's not like, it's not like this anomaly. If the doctor says, I've never seen that before in my life, I have no idea. You're like, oh, then you panic. But the doctor says, yeah, that's normal. Already, even before you know the treatment, already you're like, all right, this is normal. Tanya says, you're noticing that you did this, you thought that, you felt, you said that, all these lower things, and you're wondering, like, what's wrong with me? You're normal. Here's the diagnosis. You ready? Human being. That's your diagnosis. Human being. There you go. Diagnosis of human being. Human being has both souls. Unless you're tzaddik, in which case you're in the other room, right? Not in this room. You're in a different place for the tzaddik. 99.99999. We keep on going. It says in tradition there may be 36 in every generation. Out of 7 billion, 8 billion. I lost count. I stopped counting after a while. It was like 7, 8 billion people. Keeps on growing. 36 maybe. Good luck. Good luck finding one. Here's the point. Not that we're looking for one, by the way. It says there are hidden tzaddikim also. But the point is like this. If we are judging ourselves harshly about who we are inside, Tanya says, stop. Stop that. Don't do that. Not good, not healthy, not true. Right? You're judging yourself negatively. For what? For having selfish desires? So what? God created you like that. It's by design. It's the feature, not a flaw. What's the feature? The feature is that you and I, human beings, diagnosed as human beings with lower selves and lower drives and lower tendencies and lower instincts, should, hopefully, at least most of the time, override those tendencies and do the right thing. And in the moment, thank you, Annie, and in the moment of pushing back against the lower self, the light that is created in that moment is a greater light than the tzaddik could ever produce. I'll say that one more time. The light, spiritual light, the energy produced by the Beinani, pushing back against self and doing the right thing, is much greater energy, effort, energy, which leads to greater light, a greater, cosmic effect than anything that tzaddik in that state of natural ease could ever accomplish. When it's easy, there's a value in that it's natural and seamless. But the downside of the tzaddik is that it doesn't come with the energy, it doesn't come with the intensity. The Beinani lives a more intense life, more dramatic. That's why our lives are filled with drama. It's by design. It's not a feature. It's not a flaw. It's a feature. I'll give you an example. It's kind of like children when they're learning to walk. You ever see a little child, a toddler, learning how to walk? Yeah? They're like, looks like they had a few l'chaims. You know what I'm talking about? They're like teetering a little bit. Take the first step. They pull themselves up on something. And as a parent, you're like, oh no, now there's access. we gotta like move the glass thing from that table. Now the kid is getting more mobile. And then they pick themselves up, and they're standing up on two legs. Maybe they're taking a step or two, halting, faltering, and then the parent is engaging with them to help them learn how to walk. And so the parent will take a few steps back and call the child over to them, and the child will take a few, not so balanced steps toward the parent and almost falling. And as the child gets really close to the parent, what does the parent do? Moves backwards. And the child has to take more steps. And when the child gets really close again, the next time, you know what the parent does? Scoots back further. I have a big room behind me, so I can keep on going, right? And then further and further and further. And you can imagine the child, inside the child might be thinking, what's going on? I'm trying to get to my parent, and they keep on moving backwards. Because to the child, the goal is to give a hug or to get to the destination. But the parent's agenda, there are plenty of hugs otherwise. The parent's agenda is not for the child to get close. It's for the child to learn how to walk. In life, this is God's intent. We struggle with this because we want to be perfect. Our intent is we want to reach the destination. We want to reach perfection. And God says, it's not about perfection. I want you to learn how to walk. I want you to learn how to balance. I want you to learn how to lift one foot up and put one in front of the other and lift the other one and put it in front of the other and keep on going again and again. And every time you lift that leg, gravity, inertia, everything is going to be pulling against it to keep you rooted in your place. And every time you need to take a step, there's going to be an inner challenge, an inner battle. Will you take that step, or will you succumb to that sense of, I'm okay where I am? This is the energy of life. But it's when we walk, it's when we move forward, that the greatest light is produced, that the greatest nachas, the greatest joy is given to our Heavenly Parent, to God Almighty, and even for us, the greatest joy is born. You know for yourself. All of us here know the joy and the pleasure that's born of struggle, when it was a challenge and you fought through it and you accomplished, versus doing things that came easy. The things that came easy, how satisfactory, how satisfying were they? They were nice, it was easy. But the stuff that was difficult, the challenges that we took on, the tests that we overcame, those are the ones that are memorable. Those are the ones that are meaningful. Those are the ones that really make a difference in our lives and the lives of others. So in the final analysis, today we looked at the challenge of shame. And we explained that shame is the product of looking at oneself and judging oneself negatively, saying, I'm not such a good person inside. And we explained through a bit of a process that the response, the inner response, no one should tell you this, but your own inner response to that conclusion should be, true, I have flaws inside, but you know what? They're by design. And you know what? My expectation should not be that I'm perfect, that I'm flaw-free, that I'm spiritually airbrushed. That should not be my spiritual airbrushing. That's a good software to have. My goal should not be, my expectation, should not be that I should be perfect inside. My expectation is that I'm imperfect, but doing my best to nonetheless do the right thing. If I fall short sometimes, next week we'll talk about that, picking ourselves back up and getting back on 2 feet, walking forward. But today, it's all about judging our internal makeup a little bit more kindly, with a little bit more of realism, a realistic view. We're not meant to be perfect, therefore we're not perfect, we're imperfect. Embrace the flaws. You should know today companies are all about embracing the flaws. I mentioned about airbrushing. Many companies, many fashion companies, as you know, are having un-airbrushed models. Real people modeling their clothing, not a supermodel or whatever it is. Why? Because it's all about being real. It's all about a realistic perspective on life, a realistic view. Let's afford ourselves the same honor and the same respect. Let's afford God's creature the same respect. To not judge ourselves by a perfect standard, but rather to judge ourselves by a realistic standard. The realistic standard is that we're imperfect. Because of that, we should strive to override that and do the right thing. I'm not advocating to lower the bar when it comes to behavior. But what I am advocating, and what Tanya advocates, and what Judaism advocates, is to not judge ourselves so harshly. Is to let ourselves off the hook to a certain extent and not feel that shame. Make sense? Yes? All right.
Yes.
Let me quickly look at the chat. Don't expect creative people with specific talents, are they torn? Yeah, most people are torn. Don't expect your kids to be perfect. Correct. Yes. Some people cannot feel shame, but we're talking about in normative situations. Okay, that looks like that. Great to see you all. I want you to stay healthy and shame-free this week. No shame. It's an energy drain. Who needs your energy leaking out into negative places? Keep your energy. Stay positive. Stay realistic. Know the stuff that you know, your higher self. Know your lower self. Know when you need to stop at a red light, and when sometimes you can gun it on the yellow as well. Giving you a little gunning on the yellow permission sometimes, on occasion. All right, great to see everybody. By the way,
you, Rabbi.
my pleasure. Just
Thank you.
quick comment. I don't think I mentioned it last week. For those that might be interested, on Thursday night, this Thursday night, I'm not giving you much notice. Our center is having our annual gala dinner. The way we're doing it is we're actually bringing a gourmet catered meal to your house, to your door, and then the program is going to be online. So it's like a hybrid of like a real dinner and a virtual program. Does that make sense? I'm not going to email you, don't worry, a dinner. That's not a thing. Actual dinner delivered to your home, hot dinner, delicious, on Thursday, and then 6 p.m. will be the program. Because of Zoom, we have live musical performance from a chazan, a cantor, an opera singer in South Africa. Our keynote address is from a scholar and author in London. So we have truly an international cast of characters, of stars, and it's all in support of Intown Jewish Academy, which is the adult education wing of Chabad in town. So if you want more information, go to the website. I'm actually going to type it into the chat box. It is Intown now you can see how fast I type. jewishacademy.org/gala. IntownJewishAcademy.org/gala, and it's all for a good cause to help support education, adult Jewish learning in our community and beyond. So, if you want to join, just go there or hit me up or call me or text me. Stalk me on Facebook. However you want to do it, I'm around. All right, we'll see you all. Lots of blessings, good health, inner peace, emotional wellness, and happiness. We'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. My pleasure.
Thank you.
See you. My pleasure. Love you all. Take care.
Love you.